From KPRC2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Khambrel Marshall.
We have seen the horrific images from Ukraine these past couple of months as Russia's bombardment of cities has killed thousands of civilians. It's been heart-wrenching seeing people fleeing by the millions from what has been an attack without regard against civilians. President Biden has called it genocide because of what's taken place so far. Is it? And what's the recourse of the rest of the world in the face of it? Here this morning to talk about it, Dr. James Waller, the professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Keene State College in New Hampshire. Wendy Warren is the director of the education program at Holocaust Museum Houston. Good morning to both of you. Good to see you here. As background, I want to let people know that Keene State is home to the only undergraduate major in Holocaust and Genocide Studies in the United States. Dr. Waller is the inaugural professor of that program. I'll start with you, Dr. Waller. Are we seeing genocide in Ukraine? And what is the definition? What's the difference between genocide and war crimes? Is it subtle or not?
Thank you, Khambrel. It's good to be with you today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about this. Internationally, the three recognized atrocity crimes are war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of genocide. All three of those crimes are recognized because of the destruction that they lead to for civilian populations. I think without doubt, what we've seen in Ukraine are the commission of war crimes and the commission of crimes against humanity, particularly the forced displacement of peoples. The crime of genocide has the highest prosecutorial level because to demonstrate the crime of genocide, we have to demonstrate that the perpetrators had intent to destroy a group of people in whole or in part. Certainly, we've seen the destruction of large groups of the Ukrainian civilian population. Typically, genocide is something that the courts prove after the fact, after the destruction is over. Right now, what we have the clearest evidence for in terms of documentation are war crimes and crimes against humanity.
So what happens, let's say that is the case, who prosecutes? And somebody like Putin might say, hey, you can't prosecute me, and nothing gets done.
No, the two forms of prosecution we have for this would be the International Criminal Court, which prosecutes individual perpetrators, and the International Court of Justice, which prosecutes states. Unfortunately, a sitting head of government like Putin has diplomatic immunity, so it's very difficult to prosecute someone who's sitting in a position of authority and power. And the sad truth, Khambrel, is that by and large, the people who perpetrate these types of atrocities do tend to escape prosecution in the long run. So it's why we see the types of actions we're directing at Putin now of economic sanctions. Those type of actions, military support to the Ukrainians, are the best hope for what we can do in the immediate short term to protect Ukrainian civilians.
Now, Wendy, I know that at the museum, Director of Education, the goal is to make sure that people understand what's going on in the past so that we don't repeat those problems going forward. What's the challenge that you face at the museum in trying to differentiate between what's going on now in Ukraine and what may have happened back in the Holocaust?
Yeah, as an institution that's dedicated to the history of the Holocaust, of course, we're very alarmed by the targeting of civilians, what appears to be war crimes, all of the things mentioned earlier and by Dr. Waller. Our challenge is to help the community, especially young people, make the connections from the past to the present. We certainly see some of the same kinds of crimes being committed now, and we want people to understand that there is power in the individual, power in communities to make a difference. One of the lessons of the Holocaust is that it was not inevitable, that it could have been stopped. And we hope that people will come together in ways to help put pressure on Russia and to help control and contain this situation.
So the Holocaust Museum Houston, for those who don't know, has a human rights gallery as well. And it seems to me that this is a classic opportunity to promote and let people know they need to come because there are other atrocities happening around the world even as we speak.
Yes, we teach about the dangers of hatred, prejudice, and apathy in a variety of ways, one of which is our galleries. And so, of course, we have a Holocaust gallery dedicated to that history, but we also have a human rights gallery that is newer and really takes the connection, makes that connection between the past and the present. We want people to see what happened after the Holocaust, how a modern day human rights movement was created, what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is, and to examine the genocides that we feature, 4 of which were from the 20th century. Mm-hmm. And really look at that and examine the components of that and how it applies to the world today.
Dr. Waller, what's the recourse of the world as we watch this? It's horrific. Unlike any other, many other previous atrocities like this, we're on the front seat. We're seeing all of this stuff happen. What kind of recourse do we have? What role does the United Nations play in all of this?
I think generally when we think about the ways we can respond to these type of atrocities, we have 4 categories of response tools. We have a wide range of political response tools, legal response tools, economic response tools, and military response tools. And I think what you've seen in the response to Ukraine is the U.S., the EU, and the UN using a wide range of tools from all of those categories. What we're all trying to avoid at some level is the most lethal tool, which is non-consensual military intervention. And the escalation that can come from that type of military intervention can be catastrophically destructive. So I think we're trying to make use of every tool we have in the toolbox to put pressure on the offending actor, Putin and Russia, to change their behaviors.
I will let people know that as we often get in these kind of conversations, there's more to talk about. So we have a Newsmakers. Actually, we'll continue our conversation. But Wendy, talk to me about your optimism, if you do have optimism, and I think I know the answer to this question, about ways that organizations like Holocaust Museum Houston can make a difference in changing the outcomes of some of these things going forward in our future.
Yes, of course, education is the key, and helping people understand the causes of these events and what they can do as an individual to come together with communities to provide support to the Ukrainian people. One of the things the museum is doing is that we are hosting a concert for peace, raising money for the Ukrainian Red Cross, and that will be next week on Tuesday, May 10th. And you can go to our website to purchase tickets and support this very worthy cause.
Absolutely. Good to know. We should have said that up top. Thanks, Wendy. That's called burying the lead. That's a good opportunity for us to be able to help the folks of Ukraine. Thank you. Remember, Newsmakers Extra coming up. Dr. Waller, Wendy Warren, thank you for staying with me. We appreciate this conversation.